Okay, there it is. Webinar is now streaming on YouTube. Well, hello, everyone. I'll call us to order. Quorum being present, this meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission shall come to order. This commission operates pursuant to the land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland, local authority for the commission, derived from municipal code of the city of Annapolis, chapter 21, section 56. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve sites, structures, and districts of historical, cultural, and architectural significance. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in chapter 21, section 806. The HPC operates pursuant to the State of Maryland Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed between or amongst commissioners outside of the public hearing. Okay. Next on the agenda is roll call. First, Bill Williams, lifelong resident of Annapolis and a practicing architect. Pat Zeno, longtime resident of the city and a homeowner within the district. Kim Finch.
Present. You have to say that.
Sorry?
I do this all day long. Present.
Oh, okay. It's interesting. We haven't, I agree, present. So say present. Interesting. We haven't done that in the past, but I thought it's a roll call. So
that's that's how we're doing it in Prince George's County on planning boards and required public meetings.
Yeah. Okay.
So
especially if people are on the phone and
yeah,
not visible.
You say present. Okay?
All right. Bobby Collins, who had a 20-year career with the Naval Academy Alumni Association, which included oversight of 3 historic properties, including Ogle Hall. Will Scott had a 30-year career with the National Gallery of Art, as well as 30 years on the City of Annapolis Planning Commission. I'm Tim Leahy. I have experience in construction management and a degree in architecture. At the table, Roberta. Roberta Laynor is our Chief of Historic Preservation. She managed historic preservation at Colonial Williamsburg for 18 years and served in Virginia's State Historic Preservation Office. Our recorder is Tammy Hook, who is not on TV yet, but soon will be, right? And I think that's everybody. Our next, we need to swear in, and Hillary, I'm not sure how you want to do this to activate the folks just so they can acknowledge. The commission is authorized to require the oath to testify, and this is done en masse at the beginning of the meeting. It includes applicants, consultants, professionals, staff, and members of the public who seek to enter their comments into the record. If you intend to testify, please rise and raise your right hand. There we go. Thank you. I can see Laura and John, Phil, Leo. Is that everybody? All right. Do you affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony given and the statements you shall make are true to the best of your information, knowledge, and belief? Please respond by saying, I do.
I do.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Next on the agenda is announcements. Roberta, any announcements?
Yes, I would just like to announce that the Maryland Association of Historic District Commissions is now offering virtual training sessions. We took 101 and 102 last year, and we will talk about this at the end of the public meeting to discuss when possibly to virtually take HPC 102 ethics. That's all. Thank
you. Yeah, we did HPC 101 last year, which was legal issues. And that'll be helpful fulfilling one of our requirements that all board members get trained. Okay. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have one up for approval, April 14th. Does anyone have any changes or questions, comments? I had one. The Cathedral Street pre-app, I think it was, is listed as postponed, but I think it's withdrawn. Roberta, am I correct on that?
What was the Cathedral Street at?
It was the curb,
99?
the curb cut. Shelley Wrench.
Yes, you can change that to withdrawn, Tammy.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Tammy? Okay, great. All right. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of our April 14th.
I move to approve the minutes for April 14th, 2020.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All oppose? All abstain? Okay, passed. Okay. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. Oh, sorry, violations. I'm reading on the left here. Violations. Any reports on violations from anyone?
Well, we have a new violation discovered today of a landscaping project behind a house on Mark Street. And that required a stop work order. And I just want to remind anyone who's listening that any exterior alterations taking place to a property, whether it can be seen or not seen, is subject to review and approval with an application, historic preservation application. And I know that everyone is home now looking at their backyards, and how much they would like to do to do any upgrading of landscaping or be able to entertain outside or just enjoy outside more. But even landscaping does require an application. Thank you.
Okay. Any other violations, commissioners? Okay. Next on the agenda is the consent docket. This is a procedure designed to expedite certain applications before the commission. In order to be considered for the consent docket, the application must have received recommendation or approval with minor conditions from all city staff and commission technical advisors. Also, there needs to be no public opposition to the application. If an application is approved on the consent docket, the applicant does not need to testify further this evening. But please remember to obtain the necessary permits from the city prior to commencing the work, and please remove the posted signage. The following applications are eligible, possible for the consent docket. 144 Conduit, which received approval from the staff with no conditions, and 130 Prince George Street. So what I'm going to do is first on 144 Conduit, I'm going to accept into the record the following exhibits. Exhibit A is the certificate, the HPC public hearing application, and Exhibit B is the staff report dated 5/5/20. For 130 Prince George Street, we'll accept into the record Exhibit A, the approval revisions submitted for 8/20 and the staff report dated 5/5. So these are both eligible. There are conditions on the Prince George Street, the Shaw House. So if, is it Laura Smith? If we can just make sure Laura recognizes those two conditions which were placed on that application, and can she accept them? Or will she accept them? There we go.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we do recognize those conditions.
Okay, great. That's all I needed to know. Just for those of you who've not been through this before, the reason is required that we have public testimony on these, even though it's a simple process from a consent docket point of view. We need to make sure there's no opposition from anyone So I can ask, there's no public here right now to say one way or the other, but is there any opposition to either of these applications?
No,
Okay, great. Then you're free to go. Thank you very much for joining us. And I have to tell you, Laura, my 5th great grandfather built the Sands house. Joseph Evans. I always do this. Everyone's tired of it. But in 1725 to 28, he lived there, built that house. He was a carpenter. And so it's in the report. So I'm very excited for you to take that project forward.
So are we. What a great connection.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'll tell you more someday.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you. You're free to go.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Jameson, as well. It's probably already gone.
So we need a motion.
Oh yeah. Bobby, can you do a motion for the 2? Thank you, Tammy.
Yep, I move that we accept 2 items on the consent docket. The first one being 144 Conduit Street, which has no conditions on it. It's a straight approval. And then the second one being 130 Prince George Street, which has the following conditions on it. The applicant shall comply with the MHT easement holder provisions before proceeding with the project, and the applicant shall schedule archaeological monitoring with the city consulting archaeologist to coordinate with the commencement of excavation.
Okay, I'll take a second.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstain? Okay, the motion passes. Okay. Next on the agenda is 110 Compromise Street under old business, which is a request for a change to administrative review. So you can activate everybody else, I guess. Hillary? Hi, Leo.
Hello,
Hello.
Leo,
how are you?
All right, looks like everyone's here. Marshall's here, Phil is here. Okay, just some background since the 3 of the commissioners are relatively new and may not understand some of the background here. So I just would like to start with some background, and then Leo, then you can explain what you'd like to let us know about why this is change you feel is warranted, and then we'll have some discussion. And see where we go. Okay.
That sounds good.
Okay. So I did a little research. I didn't do every single meeting, but the initial meetings were back in January of 2016. And we had a few pre-apps, and eventually we got to an approval in April of 2016. The project evolved through another pre-app, another application by this point in January of 2017, and then another revision in 2017. So this had been going on for quite a while, obviously. Then in April of 2018, Leo came back with some additional changes, and at that point, we noticed that plans had changed due to some administrative approvals in that interim period since May of 2017. And that raised some concerns with the commission. And therefore, we, during that meeting, placed a condition that any additional changes to fenestration in particular needed to come back to the full commission for public review. This was because of the high profile of this project in general, and the public needed to be included in the discussion. Then we build up, I think, over the next 2 years, back and forth, is a more comfortable relationship, I think. And we, in the final review, which went through considerable change, because there was a real important tenant involved, or a real tenant. And prior to the Phillips folks coming in, the tenants were tentative, I would say. And then finally, we approved the current design in December 10th. Now, Leo, I believe now you want us to consider lifting that condition, which was placed 2 years ago, and to allow administrative approval of minor changes in
That's
accordance
correct.
with Section H of our administrative approval. So first of all, I'll ask Leo, does that sound like a reasonable summation for the other commissioners?
I think that it does, yes.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners at this point on the history?
No.
Okay. Well then, Leo, let us know, why don't you let us know why you think that this condition now should be lifted?
Oh, can I ask a question first?
Yeah.
I can't?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Somehow this was listed as a special there's a special exception hearing come on up. What is this special exception about?
So the special exception is the process the city goes through to allow for restaurant use. And so what happens is we did the code changes some time ago to allow for the restaurant use, but it's subject to special exception where they review things like the layouts for things like the trash rooms, how you're going to handle parking, noise, how the restaurant works, things like that. So it's general background stuff, including signage. And so each restaurant has to achieve a special exception approval as part of the process they go through prior to building permits.
Okay, so what we're looking at is that what you previously showed us does not satisfy the restaurant use.
Let me jump in here, introduce myself to the commission. Phil Dales here, attorney for the applicants for the special exception of this
No,
property.
maybe I'm looking for technical staff recommendation here.
Well, actually, again, I'll just use the chair's
Yeah.
prerogative. Tonight, we're really only looking at the request to change the condition that we placed on the applicant. They have other processes that they need to go through that are not related to the HPC.
Okay, that's fine. I just was trying to discern the difference between why the changes were required and working as a planner and frequently processing special exceptions. Usually special exceptions are processed due to special requirements.
Right. Again, what we're really only going to be talking about tonight is whether this condition should be lifted from the HPC or from this application. If it is, then it will go through the normal process of administrative review. So we really don't even necessarily need to be talking about the changes that are now being requested. Does that make sense to everybody?
Very
clear. Confirm. I wanted to confirm that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we just need to focus on that. Okay, thanks.
I have a question also. So again, just a point of clarification. So in looking at the note that we received earlier, it looked like we were to discuss, I realize this is a fine point, but we're to discuss administrative review of these changes. So you're saying that we're really going to look at administrative review where applicable on for the entire property going forward, not just on these changes for tonight. Is that correct?
Well,
No,
changes
that's not correct.
changes could come forward at any time and it would be reviewed. All we're saying is that it isn't an automatic that it goes to public hearing.
Yes, if they are applicable, if they are administrative changes that are applicable only under the administrative guidelines, whether these changes are going forward, that's what we're looking at tonight. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And it will be up to the discretion of the staff as changes come forward. We all know this project's probably not done, but we want to move it forward. The staff will be given the flexibility.
Asking Tim, So we need to discern if the changes proposed now are administrative versus major.
No, we will just allow them to be administrative. At this point, we
Oh.
don't even allow them to be administrative.
Oh, so they have been determined to not be administrative.
All changes to fenestration in particular or building elevations required a public hearing on this application. We are now we're going to hear the testimony for why that should not be the case if it's a minor change under, again, according to the guideline, according to the rules of the guidelines, minor changes can be approved administratively.
Tim, let me ask a question that may help clarify this, and it certainly will for me as one of the newer commissioners you referred to. This condition that all matters that might normally be administratively approved for this site and this application must come for public hearing, right? This is a unique requirement of this project.
Yes.
How is that legal?
I'm not going to determine that, but this was placed on it 2 years ago. We're here to just, not the legality of it, we're just here to talk about.
Okay.
And
All right, thank you.
Can I step in on that one? Not that I'm an attorney, but I do believe that because the administrative approvals, that power is given by, and specifics, that power is given by the HPC to staff. It is not, and there are specific guidelines regarding the administrative approvals. I believe just as staff can say, well, gee, this could be reviewed administratively, but I believe that it needs to come before the commission. Staff has that option. Just as staff has that option, I believe that the commission has the option in high profile properties to, or in whatever, in certain properties to ask that projects come before them. So I think it's a power within the commission. So,
Okay, I follow you. Thank you. But I have a follow-up question to that. Has it ever been exercised before? This power?
you mean where we've asked to see things?
To see all things
Not
pertaining
to
to
my-
anyone.
Not to my
So
tenure.
this is unique and it's only being
Yeah.
done to this.
No, I don't agree. I think Roberta can show you times in the past when we have done this.
Okay.
Is that true,
Yeah.
Roberta?
Yeah. Probably prior to Roberta.
Well,
We're on board.
what I'm trying to get is a definitive answer. Has this been applied previously or not?
It doesn't
Answers-
really matter, Will, because.
I
if
think it
was
does matter a
applied-
great deal.
No, if it applied to this situation, the question is, why would we change our opinion at this point? So Leo is free to tell us why it's appropriate at this
We
time.
can do
I'm
some
sorry to
research.
disagree
That's
and
what
to
we're
be
waiting
obstinate.
For. That's what we're
I
waiting.
believe I deserve an answer to the question so that I'm better informed in considering this request.
The answer is we don't know, Will, but we can do research after the fact, okay?
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Leo, would you like to explain your rationale?
Yes, I would. Thanks. So just before I share my screen, I'm just going to talk through what's happened here. So in the process of going through the schematic design with Mr. Phillips and fine tuning things, the interior layout of the building changed in ways that I do not feel are major. And I'll show you what they are, and you can decide for yourself if they are. What happens as a result of that is some of the fenestration on the outside changes, and there's a modest adjustment to one portion of the second floor related to exiting the building safely.
Okay.
So what we've done here is we've refined the schematic design package, and as a result, we were able to make other changes to the outside that
Leo, if I could
are
interrupt
here.
real quick, we don't really need to review the changes.
Well, I think you do in order to understand what we're asking, because really my request here is not for blanket approval of the process where I just do this administratively. It's to correct a couple modest changes to the building. So I don't think you can really make a decision about whether or not it's appropriate to do them administratively without understanding the changes, which is why I submitted the package I did.
Yeah.
You don't know what the changes are. You really can't say whether it's appropriate to give that authority to Roberta. The reality here is the changes, in my opinion, are really quite modest. And once you see them, I think you would, well, we'll find out what you think, but the intent here is to avoid a lengthy delay to the project for things that really are of modest consequence, if any at all.
That's really what I would like to hear more about. Why do you believe this is needed right now? And I think you're getting to it. We're trying to make sure this project moves forward on a timely basis. So that rationale is what we're going to talk about mostly, and we're going to vote on whether or not to lift the condition or not. We're not going to vote on the changes.
No, we're going to not lift the commission. We're going a condition. We're going to find it's inappropriate in this case because the changes are minor, right?
That's the intent. And again, it's
Okay.
not a long process. We'll go through it quite quickly. And just to be clear, I'm not asking for this to be the process moving forward. It's just for these elements because the special exception is coming up and the changes after that will require a whole nother round of changes and reviews. Really, this is what I'm calling cleanup. So I don't think it's, you know, if something happens in the future, I'd like to come back and talk about that at that time. But really, it's just the modest changes I have in front of me today as a result of client input.
Okay, Pat has a question.
Okay. Leo, I'm going to address this question because I understand what Mr. Leahy is saying. I'm going to address this question to Ms. Lehner. Ms. Lehner,
Wow.
in your opinion, the changes being brought tonight, because I wasn't prepared to look at changes tonight. In your opinion, are these changes that are able to be approved administratively?
I believe the reason that we are here is to understand whether the changes can be reviewed administratively. I had determined that a portion could and the other portion couldn't. And that's why I think Leo wishes to give some information about what those are in order to, for the commission to agree or disagree whether that is minor or major.
Okay, so
That's all major, not whether it's approvable or not.
well,
Right.
I guess the reason
Our vote is
for the
not going to be,
question-
our vote is not going to be on whether they're minor or major. The vote is
Yeah.
going to, again, I'm just going to keep on saying it, whether to lift this condition on this particular application.
Okay. Okay, I guess the reason for my question was if we didn't have this condition, if they would have been able to be approved administratively, and you really just answered that, so thank you.
Okay, so Leo, you proceed, but as I said, we're not going to be able to determine whether these are minor or major tonight.
Well, bear with me. I believe that you will. So let's see.
I think this might be appropriate time, Leo, just as we touched a little bit on the background of the special exception. I think that if we're going to explain why we're asking for the authority for Ms. Lehner to be able to approve these administratively, we should very quickly clear up where we are with the special exception and the brief history of that, what that's about.
That would be helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
What's the schedule on that?
Sure. So the application for the special exception is because a restaurant in this zoning district, WMC, requires one. And there are conditions, there are standards that a restaurant in this zoning district needs to meet. The application for that special exception was filed in late January. And then after discussions with Mr. Phillips, it became clear that his understanding had been that the approval for a restaurant was focused on the square footage of the restaurant rather than the seat count. And so essentially we've increased the seat count to meet Mr. Phillips's needs and have resubmitted the special exception application and have no reason to believe there's any of the criteria there that aren't met. But because of the changes we made, certain other changes to the building were necessitated. One of them was related to fenestration, which was specifically called out and meeting the chair referred to as requiring board approval. And so the change to the fenestration and several other very minor changes in our view that we will get to are now shown on our application that's into the Board of Appeals and being reviewed right now by Planning and Zoning. So as Leah walked through the various changes, keep in mind that that's the way that those changes came about, and they just now need to be, we're hoping, approved administratively to match the application that we put into the Board of Appeals. Currently, we're on course to be heard at the June 2nd Board of Appeals meeting for the special exception.
Thanks. That clarifies the date for us, I think.
Tim, may I ask Mr. Dales a question or two?
If there are relevant questions and probative, yes.
Well, I believe that all of my questions are relevant and probative, but anyway, that's another question. That is your call. Mr. Dales, you just mentioned the Board of Appeals, but my 30 years experience on the Planning Commission is that special exceptions for restaurants go to the Planning Commission. Have you been before the Planning Commission, or did you simply misspeak?
No, I didn't misspeak. That's changed since you were on the Planning Commission. Special exception
Okay.
will go to Board of Appeals.
Oh, okay.
This
But-
won't go to the Planning Commission.
Are the standards that are applicable for the granting of a restaurant special exception essentially the same as they were before that change in authority was enacted?
Yes, they are essentially the same. The criteria haven't changed much. In this case, the WMC district allows restaurants by special exceptions subject to standards. And so those standards are unique to this property, but otherwise they're the same criteria you'd be familiar with.
Okay. And as an attorney, would you say that the special exception process for a restaurant is distinct legally from the approval of the HBC? Has different standards, different requirements to be met, different
Legally, they are
authority?
distinct. They are
Pardon?
distinct. Legally, they're distinct procedures. However, of course, they're interrelated in
Yeah.
their plans that go into both this approval for a certificate of approval and the plans that will be included with the special exception.
Thank you.
Okay. And Leo, if you would just focus
So-
again on.
I'm going to go through these very quickly.
Okay.
I'm starting with an email that we sent over in April to Roberta, because she wanted us to quantify what the changes were, because when you change drawings, it's very hard to figure out what's different from the last drawing.
Right.
So you'll see in the body of the text here, if you can read this, A1.2 is the second floor. There's a change to a bump out on an existing stair related to the exit width requirements to get out of the building safely. It's inches, literally. The second is a clarification on the placement of the first floor storefront nearest the exterior door. There's some pieces that are going back to what was initially approved. The interior exit stair was configured in a different manner, and it comes out of the building about 12 feet from where it was shown in the initial application. So the door arrangement changes. And then finally, we were able to eliminate the necessity for the spandrel glass in the bathroom, which you may recall we had some discussion about whether that was appropriate or not in the initial application. After reconfiguring the interior of the restaurant, we were able to eliminate the necessity for that. So that's the substance of the changes. And now I'll show you what they look like. So just looking at the first floor, this is what we have today, right? This was the initial the last application you saw. And you'll remember there was an exit stair, a door added over here, the new stair here, and then a change to these storefront components over here to provide for the entry. So those were changes we came to you with last time that were approved. Since that time, with the reconfiguration of the restaurant piece, these are the things I changed. This door right here moved from here to here. It was all intended to be glass, just the location of the door moved. So if I toggle back, you'll see this is what we had
The long
before,
hallway.
this door.
Mhm.
Can you see that?
Mhm.
And then this is what I have today, the bubbled area. That's what's changed. Similarly, on the bottom, you'll see there was a door over here in the initial design in glass. The door moved to the other side. So the glass and the door switched behind the entry stair. That's the sum total of the changes on the first floor. If we go to the second floor, again, this is what we have today. This is what we had approved at the last application, the enclosure of the second floor inside of the column assembly, the addition of the stair, and here's where we had the spandrel glass panels we talked about in the bathroom. As a result of the reconfiguration, the stair shifted, So I was able to put the glass back the way it was initially approved, the same over here. So these went back to the prior approval. And then on this side, I'm going to zoom in just so you can see it. Bear with me. So on the bottom of your screen, this door bump out changed by about 4.5 inches, 3.5 inches, the way this came out. So if I go to the prior one, right, let me go back out again. You can see that's what I have in this one right now. And this is what we had before. So it was longer and it came out a certain distance. And just through the configuration of the exit stair, I was able to get the door to work with less of a bump out. So that's the change, the enclosure of that piece, which is a good deal away from the exterior. And honestly, the doors are out here. So it's really an interior change. But if the doors are open, you would see it. So that's why Roberta wanted to make sure everyone knew what was happening. And then again, so in elevation, these are the changes. This is what we have approved, right? And there's the change right there. So if I go back, you'll see there was a door and windows, or the door and windows here. So there's the door behind the stair. And the door moved over here and that became windows, right? That's the change on that side. No change to the masonry opening whatsoever. These are just a reconfiguration of where doors and windows go in that case. On the other side, facing the Donner lot, this is what we have approved. This is the change. So this window changes to be a real window. And the door here, as we saw from the exit stair, flipped from this location to this location. Keep in mind, this was part of a prior approval granted by the commission. So this is really just going back to what was done before.
No. So Leo, two of these changes revert back to a previously approved application.
That's correct. So, and then on the other side here, this is what we have approved. And let me see if I can get to that real quick here. I might have clicked past it. I did that one. This side is what we have approved. And the change over here is going back to this window that was approved prior. So again, I had taken the window out and put a door because that's where the stair came in. And then I went back to the prior approval. You can see that matches what's above. This is what was, that's what's in place now, that's approved. It's the same thing. This side doesn't change. I don't need that door anymore.
Excuse me, Leo. Could you
Yeah.
go back to sheet 11 and 12, 1 minute?
Bear with me. Which one is 11 of 12, you said?
11 and with
Yes.
11. So 11, lower elevation, you have basically removed the one purple lined door. If you go to 12,
That's what's happened. The door just, that door just got eliminated.
Mr.
And
Williams, I
again,
think you're on
this
mute.
goes back to the prior approval. So you can see up here, this is what we have built today. I just don't need that door there any longer.
Right, so it's reverting.
Right. So,
Okay.
so your elevational changes, again, are reverting back to a prior approval simply because the interior of the building has changed a bit.
Mhm.
So that's why we were hoping to avoid the lengthy process of doing a public hearing and announcing it and trying to get it scheduled and all the forms that go with it. But what I felt were, again, changes that weren't detrimental to the outcome of the project. And in fact, it had achieved prior approval. I mean, you could argue perhaps that the change to the stair piece there is a change in the form of the building, if you will. However, you have to remember, it's well back from where the enclosure is. And, this is the change. I mean, it's this bump got shorter, but came out just a few more inches. And it's really related to the pull requirement on the side of a door, where if I come to it, I need to have 18 inches between the doors.
Okay.
So those are the changes. I'm not asking for you to go further than to allow for administrative review of these changes with the proper forms and everything else.
Well, yeah, what if we move forward, you're basically enabling future administrative changes as well.
That's not my
If
request.
Roberta feels they're minor.
That's not my request. My
I
request.
know it's
here-
not, I'm not saying it is, but I'm just telling you, once we make this motion, it actually makes it easier for future changes as well that might be minor.
But I don't think it has to
I
go
would,
that way,
I would
Tim,
just
because
interject here. I think that it's possible to remove the condition that you referred to earlier in a limited manner so that it's removed with regard to the proposed changes that Leo is presenting and not for all changes that would otherwise qualify as administrative.
that's what I would recommend we do, just because, look, I don't want to put anybody in jeopardy here. I mean, these are, under normal circumstances, I could easily do this with staff. But in this case, because of the history of the project, the commission was concerned about what could happen through that same process. And I think, I don't want to undermine the intent, which is to keep a close eye on this, but just for this limited case, I don't want to say this in all future, it's just this proposed modification be handled administratively.
Okay, that's reasonable, and that's a good compromise. Just as we make a motion to do this, first of all, anyone have any other questions? Any more deliberation?
I have a comment
Okay,
here.
Yep.
Are you able to hear me?
yep, uh-huh,
Okay. When the project was reviewed in December, the commission also reviewed seating, and that has not been discussed tonight.
Right.
The seating also changed, seating increased, and while we don't count seating in our review, we do count change, and we do consider the impact on the view shed and focal points. And there is seating where there was not seating previously. And I had considered recommending that for a public hearing, because I thought that the commission would be interested in how seating might change the full vote. And we also reviewed lighting. And the question would be, how has the lighting changed if the seating changed?
So that's a good point, Roberta. Let's talk about that for a minute. So in the application that you looked at initially, the first floor had 74 or 68 seasonal seats outside the first floor. And we've changed that from 68 to 74 on the first floor. On the second floor, I had seasonal outdoor seating in the initial application at 58, and now the seasonal outdoor seating is 106. That's on the second floor, in the second floor only. So yeah, there are changes to the seating as necessitated by Mr. Phillips. But I would also offer that I think we've got the furniture has been approved. I haven't added any umbrellas, which could be detrimental to the view sheds. There's the same amount of umbrellas in both locations. The seating count has been increased, but the seating design has been approved. The umbrellas were approved. And the seating count, I would offer that, the special exception hearing is a public hearing where discussions center around the use of the building and the seating. So there's another venue for the public to provide input and testimony if they have concerns about those numbers. So I understand your point, but I guess I would just counter it by saying there's an ample opportunity for the public to weigh in on that in a different arena, if you will. And I'm not so sure that I feel that the seating count is really overly problematic from a historic standpoint, but that's just an opinion.
Well, I would point out that it should not be ignored, that it either is going to be administrative review or a public hearing review, and the commission can determine that tonight.
I'd just like to provide a little context on that issue of seating. The seating will be a part of what the Board of Appeals reviews. And part of the reason for our request tonight to ask for administrative approval is the recognition that in reality, plans even after approval by the Board of Appeals are frequently rearranged and adjusted so that the location of seats may change a bit. And of course, those will affect the things that the chief mentioned and that are relevant to the historic district. But I don't believe it's the case that every adjustment to the seating plan that's otherwise compliant with the approval of this commission needs to come back for a review. I think after special exception would be approved, those things may change, but we'd still be in conformance with your approval.
Yeah, and the furniture, the whole furniture issue is probably going to change dramatically over the next 3 months. We need to be honest about that.
That's a good point.
And the only, I didn't want to really talk about this because it was really not on, but since we are talking about the commission does need to look at the massing of station. We're more worried about view sheds and massing and clutter, not the actual arrangement of the furniture or the number. So we were focused in prior reviews and approvals on waitress stations and things like that. So that's what is within our purview.
I would
No,
suggest
I have a
you also
question.
want to be sure that you consider lighting, which might change.
Lighting as well, yeah.
We're not proposing any changes to the lighting.
Okay, all right.
I have a question.
Yeah, okay, Pat.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I can't see if you can see me or not. So I'm a little confused here. So what, Mr. Wilson, what you went through initially were the minor fenestration changes, the door moving from one spot to another, but it sounds like, according to Ms. Lehner, the issue here is in addition these 58 to 106 seats are exterior seats. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we approved the 58 seats. Is that correct?
My understanding is that you did, yes.
Okay. So to go, on that one, I agree with Ms. Lehner. And in terms of, do we approve seating, whatever? Well, we've certainly approved, for instance, at Starbucks when they had an exterior furniture and cafe, we certainly worked on that with them. So that is, if that was approved before by us, which it was, and looked at and considered and put up there for public testimony, that's a whole different thing from what was presented, which looked to be pretty minor changes. And Mr. Leahy, I just want to say that, we have certain restrictions or certain rules for public testimony and bringing and timetables for bringing things up before the public and legalities that we need to live by. So I go back to the thing tonight, which is, are we approving a project? Or are we just approving certain things as being administratively approved? Anyway.
Where we were headed is really just talking about the elevation fenestration changes and lifting the requirement for public hearing for this particular set of drawings on the fenestration.
Correct, but then
The seating is a separate, we're not approving anything about the seating tonight,
okay.
or whether it can be approved administratively.
Yeah, okay, well, I just want to make sure we're on the same page as far as
The
if
determination.
we would review the seating and that comes under outdoor furniture and view shed and whatever. We looked at it before, so
Yeah.
I don't see why we wouldn't be looking at it again.
Well, let me talk to that for just a minute.
Actually, Roberta had her hand up first, Leo.
I'm sorry.
Roberta.
It's my understanding that it's Mr. Wilson's desire not to return to public hearing, which is what I had requested. And so then seating would have to be considered. Do you agree with that?
That's correct. We're trying to avoid another public hearing. Now, I just want to point out one part of this for this seating, and I understand the concern, but the first floor seating, which could in fact be in the view shed, is where the change is the most modest. It goes from 68 to 74 seats outside this building on the first floor. The second floor seating, while the number is larger, is all behind the half parapet wall that's around the perimeter of the building. And some of it is more interior in terms of proximity to the exterior facade. So I would argue that, the second floor seating is far less, has far less impact on the experience of the neighborhood, the historic district than the first floor. Yes, there's more seats up there, but they're not, there's none that are any closer to the edge than they were before. So I'm not sure I understand why it would be problematic to put more seats on the second floor if it doesn't change the experience in a meaningful way from a historic perspective. As I said, the furniture has all been approved. The wait stations haven't moved. The umbrella count hasn't gone any higher. So that's why we felt, that shouldn't be a problem for the commission. And as I said earlier, the seating count is more an issue of the special exception because there were limits on the numbers in there. So the special exception is the venue where the public has an opportunity to tell us whether or not they approve of that. I'm not sure, but that's enough.
Just to add to that comment for the applicant, if there is a legal question about whether this commission has jurisdiction over the number of seats, perhaps that could be put to the counsel for the commission, the Office of Law. But tonight, our request is not that your approval for changing the number of seats. And so if it's determined that we do need that approval, probably what I will do with the Board of Appeals is ask for a condition of approval from them. That would require us, if it's within your jurisdiction to approve the number of seats, to come back to you post approval for your blessing on the number of seats, and that our prior special exception will be approved conditioned on that approval from you after the fact. If it's our view that the number of seats is not within the board's approval, that isn't to say that we don't believe the outdoor furniture and the many other aspects are within this commission's jurisdiction. So there are lots of parts of the outdoor furniture that this commission already ruled on, and we're asking that we go forward in compliance with those changes or with those rulings, and that if there is a determination that we need further approval for seat counts, that we would try to come back after our approval. But tonight, we aren't asking for any change to the rules without a seat count from this group.
Right. So what it would require is if it does go in that direction and the seating is required not to be minor, then our meeting of 9th of June, which is a week after your special exception hearing, would possibly occur.
I'm not sure we can meet the notice requirements for that point. I don't believe.
Tim, are we entering into discussion?
I think we're entering into, personally, I think what we're talking about is what comes under our purview. Or
Yeah,
that's
and
actually
that
what
seems
we're-
to me to be discussion, and I'm asking the chair to.
Sure, yes, we're in the
respond.
yes, we're not going to close testimony here. This is not an application.
Yeah.
So this can be a free discussion back and forth.
Thank you. Tim, I appreciate the way you're trying to keep the whole conversation and discussion focused, but since we are discussing a number of different issues, I'd like to observe the following. I think that Ms. Lehner has demonstrated in my time on the commission her expertise and her degree of adherence to the code regulations beyond what I would ask her to do. And I'm saying that because I have confidence that she will make the right judgment to require public hearings when they're necessary. I think we're subjecting this application to a level of scrutiny that we may have the authority to do, but just because we have the authority doesn't mean we need to exercise that authority unless it improves the project. And in my recent reviews of these requests by Mr. Wilson and the applicant, I don't think we're making significant improvement. What we're doing is delaying a very worthwhile and fine project at a time when it's ever more difficult to have the community thrive economically and socially. So I really would like to extend their request, and I'm perfectly happy to compromise and say that it's only for the things that they presented tonight, and that Roberta or we as a whole reserve the right to call any of the other matters of lighting and seating, which I do think can be quite substantial and need review. But Mr. Dales made a fine point about the public review that will come through the special exception process. So I think we're, to be very blunt, I think we're kind of beating a dead horse here.
Tim, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Well, my question is, has this special exception requirement been part of this application the entire time we've been looking at the application?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you kind of take me through it?
Well, you said that that the use of a restaurant in this zone would require a special exception. And so we've been looking at this site for a long time. How long has this a special exception requirement been part of this approval, been part of this requirement?
Well, the requirement for the special exception dates back to the code changes at the onset of the project back in 2016 or 2015. So that's part of the approval process that runs, I would say, concurrently with your review. I mean, we have to come up with a scheme outside that works, and then we have to go through the special exception with the city to make sure the use of the building is consistent with all of the other requirements related to the special exception. So that's been something in place for, since the code change.
I think it's been during the entire review of this process, hasn't it?
I would say so, although we didn't even apply for it because we didn't know who the user was until Mr. Phillips came forward. So I can't apply for a restaurant unless I know what his plan is.
Commissioner Finch, there's a bit of a chicken or the egg issue with these kinds of applications that require dual approval from this commission and from the Board of Appeals. You have to have one before the other. And in this case, it seemed wise to get the approval from this body first. But just to be clear, the requirements of the special exception haven't been and still aren't a part of the criteria or the review of this commission. Those are separate for the Board of Appeals, and we'll have to comply with both. But it's perfectly reasonable to look at this project from the commission's point of view and then separately from the Board of Appeals.
So I have I'm sorry, is Kim, are you still talking?
No, so you're just saying, when did you first apply for the special exception?
That application went in late January. We were on schedule to be heard at the March Board of Appeals hearing before we had to request postponement. And then since then, we've been obviously affected by the health crisis and the ability to have virtual meetings with the Board of Appeals.
Okay, can I ask Roberta, were we aware that there was a special exception in process when I think we reviewed this in February or March? When, not March.
We approved it in December.
In December. So there was no special exception in process at that time.
That's correct.
Sounds correct. And I'm not sure what that would change in my thinking about our role in this.
No, I'm just saying that in order to coordinate the two, does one precede the other? And we're trying to determine that. I'm trying to determine that.
Yeah.
Which could there have been a concurrent step going forward? And now we're put in a position that they have a hearing about a special exception that is, we're in May of 2020. So were we aware at the previous decision we made that there was a special exception requirement that might alter the elevations, facades of the building?
Well, special exception, correct me if I'm wrong, just has to do with the seating.
There are other requirements, Mr. Chairman, but the reason for the changes we're asking for tonight is because of the change to the floor plans. And we have, correct me if I'm wrong about that.
No, I mean, this is really about how Mr. Phillips intends to use the space. Now, I would also go back to the HPC approval we achieved at the last meeting we attended. I don't believe the seat count was referenced in the ruling.
No, but Mr. Wilson, I'm looking at the plan. I'm looking at A1.2, which shows, do we look at the seat count? No, and I don't believe that it is in our purview, but do we look at the amount of, that is on the second floor, it is in the sight line. Do we look at the furniture? Do we look at the umbrellas? You're talking about almost doubling the number of whatever is going up there. So
so here you can see the prior approval.
and obviously different furniture, different configurations, whatever. So what you showed us is what we approved. If you're talking about, well, the bars won't be there and the bar stools won't be there, and so something else will be there, that's not what we approved. But that's really not what I thought we were talking about tonight. I thought we were strictly talking about the minor changes on the building, and would they be approvable, administratively approvable? Is that not correct? And Mr. Leahy, is that not correct?
The condition talks about fenestration changes. And so
Mhm.
that's what we were going to be discussing tonight.
Okay.
We've now got into additional requests, I guess, from the applicant.
No, this is all in the paperwork I filed with Roberta, and I thought she had sent it out to the
No, we've seen these plans. She sent the plans out to us.
and a description of the work. I just want you to be aware, this was the prior approval. Here's all the furniture on the second floor. The furniture is approved, the umbrellas are approved, reduce the number. Here's the new furniture layout. The furniture layout on the second floor, yes, it did change, but this is, again, it wasn't part of the initial approval, and I'm not so sure that it's such a big problem for the HPC in terms of how many seats are up there. I mean,
It appears to be fewer tables and more couches.
Yeah, I mean,
I really don't see it that.
I'm just not sure why this would be an issue for HPC. Now, to Roberta's credit, she wants to make sure that we've considered everything. And I think that's the reason she was reluctant to take this on without talking to the commission. But
Mhm.
I'm trying to emphasize the point that A, I don't believe it's an issue for the HPC, and B, even if it were, the changes are in the scope of the project quite modest. Now, the seat count, you could argue could be a problem, but again, that's not an issue, in my opinion, for the HPC. That's an issue for the special exception through the Board of Appeals.
So in summation, then we have two things to agree upon. One is the exterior changes to the fenestration and removing the condition that needs to go to public hearing. The second, if we want to consider whether the changes to the furniture are to the degree that any of our guidelines are violated based on those changes of the prior approval. I guess and we can't get on the June 9th public hearing if I'm understanding what I'm hearing.
I don't see how we can meet the notice requirements because it has to be posted. The property has to be posted.
Yeah.
And then we're supposed to receive review comments from Roberta and whoever she sends this to prior to that. And then also, I think there's a posting in the paper, if I'm not mistaken, that's required.
There is.
It's 45 days.
Yeah.
So, I mean, by the time you add all of that up, that makes June impossible.
Mr. Leahy,
Yes.
just a thought. Again, I think we're getting into, I think, and it's unfortunate we don't have a city attorney here, but I think we're getting into murky territory if we approve certain things per se because of the lack of putting it before the public and whatever. I think the question here is, are these administratively approvable items? And do we believe that staff can make the determination on these items? I mean, I think that's
actually, let me,
way to handle it.
again, I'd like to separate the two topics. I think I'm going to make a statement and you tell me if you disagree, but as far as the fenestration changes, they appear to be administratively approvable. We've gotten off on this tangent about the changes to the furniture. Since we're talking about it, what is our individual thoughts on whether we believe that's a minor change according to the section H of our guidelines, of our administrative approval guidelines.
Tim, since you posed the question, you'll not be surprised that I think that all of that is minor and can be approved administratively.
Pat?
I know this will surprise you, but I'm going to say that I believe these changes, the furniture is the same. There's no additional, that's correct, Mr. Wilson?
No additional,
No additional, the furniture's staying the same. There's no additional umbrellas.
that's correct.
At this juncture, you're not bringing any additional lighting or different lighting, is that correct?
No, the lighting plan is identical to the one presented initially.
Okay. I would agree that these are, I'm not voting for or against them. I'm voting that these are within the scope of the administrative changes.
Okay. Kim, what are your thoughts?
I think we lost Kim. I don't see her.
No, I'm
There she
back.
is.
Oh, she's there. Okay.
They bounce back in when you talk.
Yeah, I'm in my kitchen, so I have to turn it off. I just feel that it was long known that I don't feel that this is an administrative change. I really think that we have been looking at this for a long time, and we've looked at it recently, and these changes weren't brought forward at that time, knowing that there might be a special exception moving forward. So I think we deserve the same level of review that
Okay.
other parts of the governmental apparatus do. So
Okay.
I just, I can't feel comfortable with this because we're being asked to look at some changes and ignore other changes and not frequently shown the whole picture.
All right, Will, or Bill, what do you think?
As far as the building shell and its changes, I guess you'd call it the north elevation, that one has actually improved. We've gotten rid of the door. It's gotten glass. I have no problem with that. As far as the south elevation, the bump out that was approved has gotten smaller. You've adjusted position of doors. I don't have any issues with that. If I'm understanding right, the furniture is same design as it's already been reviewed and looked at. It's really the arrangement of furniture. In theory, that could be taken care of any time. It doesn't have to be taken care of now, right up until the day that the restaurant opens. And I won't be a bit surprised if later down the road, the restaurateur comes in and goes, you know, we really want to move this and get better seating, better views or something at that point.
Yeah.
So to be beating up on furniture, I'm sorry, it just seems a little bit premature at this point. Am I missing something?
No, I think you're saying that the furniture rearrangement can be administratively approved,
and
as this is, with the expectation that it will probably change again.
it will probably move. It will probably, and I'm looking at
Constantly.
I'm looking at Leo's arrangement here, and I'm saying, you know, I could get 4 more seats over here and 4 more seats over there.
Don't
Like
do
take
that.
those 2s and the 4s, and I might be able to get another 15 more seats in here. That's 15 more customers.
Well, as I said, this is all going to change in the next few months because of the virus. So
Yeah.
I agree that it's all might all change, but I don't agree. I'm very concerned about setting any sort of precedent.
I don't think we want to set a precedent. I'm not sure how we would be if we just for this meeting set the statement that these items can be handled administratively and be very clear what those items are. Nothing else can be done that way.
Yes.
All shell revisions, changes to the physical structure has to come back and be reviewed.
I'm only really interested in where our ability to approve is only based on furniture, not arrangement of furniture and elevations.
Well, then if it's not arrangement, it's furniture itself.
Our guidelines
So
would,
correctly, the furniture has not changed.
our guidelines would involve any kind of visual clutter. And again, I mentioned that the
Yes.
waitress stations are, if they were to change significantly, I would believe we would need to have another approval. But if they're
Right.
not changing, I think Leo said
Yeah.
the waitress stations are not changing.
No, they're the same as they were initially.
Okay. Bobby,
Okay,
Bobby, you
Leo,
want to chime in?
Yeah.
Leo, can I ask a question?
Okay.
So you were long aware of the special exception requirements for this site. The last time you brought this to us, you didn't present what these issues were.
Well, let's talk about that for just a minute. The special exception is another city process that's clearly outlined in the code. So I haven't created the necessity to go through the special exception. Every restaurant in Annapolis has to get one. We're not everyone, but everyone in this zone has to get one. There are certain zones where you're allowed to do it if you meet certain requirements. You have to demonstrate need in some cases. You got to make sure you've handled trash properly. I went through all of that with Ms. Rouse at the city long ago. The problem is that I can't tell you what each user is going to ask me to do. So the process of going through the HPC was to essentially, from my side, let's establish the architecture of the building, let's put the furniture in place, and let's move forward. Subsequent to my last application, the owner decided to make changes to the layout and seat count of the restaurants. I accommodated those changes as best I could while minimizing to the greatest extent practical the architectural changes. So I feel like there's an implication here that there was something that was less than straightforward with how this was.
No, I think I'm hearing a misunderstanding or miscommunication here. I think it would be helpful to be clear, Commissioner Finch, that the request that we're making here isn't to make compliant something which was not. The changes that we're asking for here aren't to meet the special exception criteria. The application previously did meet those criteria, and again, with these changes still does. Those changes and you're right, those standards were in place and we were aware of them. But as Leo just said, what we weren't aware of is what the particular user who didn't exist at the beginning of this process would need to do with his layouts and his seat counts.
Okay. Bobby, what are your thoughts?
I'm fine with the fenestration changes, the shell of the building that they've suggested in this particular request. I'm fine with those. I'm fine with the seating as long as that's what it is. As long as, I can't remember at this point who said it, but as long as it's not umbrellas, lighting, things like that. But I also trust Roberta as she's administratively reviewing things and or approving them to know when it's something more that does need to come back to us. So,
Okay.
in a nutshell, that's it.
Okay. Right. So in summary, I think a majority of the commissioners are feeling like certainly the fenestration changes are administratively approved. And I'm also hearing that we can delegate to staff approval of the seating changes. With the understanding that there's really rearranging previously approved furniture designs, umbrellas, and lighting. If there are any changes to those, that would not be administratively approvable. And this we're doing, and any changes need to continue to be reviewed by Roberta, by staff. Is that a reasonable summary? Does anyone, I'll propose a motion and then we can talk about it.
Tim, you just said that any changes in the future would be administratively reviewed.
I'm sorry, I
Is that what
didn't
we're
mean,
agreeing
I
to?
meant, no, I did not. Any changes in the future would be reviewed by Roberta, and the determination whether they're minor or not would still be the case. If she feels they're not minor,
That's
it
what I
requires
want
public
to
review.
be clear.
Yeah, yeah.
This may be a one-time exception to timetable requirements,
Yes,
but
it's an
I
accommodation.
think this should be totally placed on Roberta's shoulders going forward.
Well, I think I'd accept Leo's proposal. Let's make this just about this particular set of drawings.
That's what I might be agreeable to, okay?
Okay, all right. So let me try a motion. I'll accept a motion to remove the condition placed on the revised application for 110 Compromise Street. The condition was placed in April 2018 to allow the changes defined in the drawings submitted. And what are the dates on this drawing here?
March. March 27th.
327. Okay. Building changes defined in the drawings submitted 327, dated 327. It includes building elevation changes and proposed seating rearrangement. So I'll restate that, okay? I'll accept a motion to remove the condition placed on the revised application for 110 Compromise Street in April 2018. We will allow the changes defined in drawings dated 327 to the building elevations and the seating arrangement to be approved administratively.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, all in favor?
aye.
All opposed? All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, Leo and team there, did you get what you expected out of or need out of this? Again, we actually narrowed the scope down to just this set of drawings,
Yes,
with the
Mr.
understanding that Roberta can now review them administratively and as going through the normal administrative review process, she can get back to you on them.
Yeah, that works for us. And, you know, I don't like coming back to you guys with this stuff any more than you like seeing me here to talk about things. But I have clients and clients have needs and need change over time. And so I
Now,
try,
Leo, we love hearing you talk.
I try to be sensitive to what you people are trying to do. And I feel like we're trying to do much the same thing. So if I can avoid coming, I'm avoiding coming. I can't tell you.
No, we don't want you to avoid coming. We want you to just, submit what you need and then we make the determination.
Yes.
Do not avoid anything.
I won't let him.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. And I appreciate the,
Well, we all want this
willingness
project
to-
to go forward. And
I think we all do.
yeah, and like I said, cross our fingers. We'll see what happens. I appreciate what Steve is doing and I hope he could get through it.
Yeah, we do too. Thank you very
All right.
much for the time. Sorry it took so long to get through. And again, I appreciate
okay.
all the efforts.
It's a
from
big
the
deal.
commission and Roberta works extra hard to try and make these things happen. So again, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Take
Tim.
care.
Good meeting.
Take care. And we will have an administrative meeting. Oh, let's see. Any other business? I don't think so. We're done. Any other business for the good of the order?
Move
Unless you talk about a date for training.
Oh, okay. Do we have to sign up or is it virtual? It's virtual, right?
Yes, but we have to schedule the instructor. So
Um,
if you want to put it instead of an administrative meeting as we did previously, that
yeah, I would propose maybe the administrative meeting in June.
Sounds good.
Okay. There is an administrative meeting scheduled later this month. I don't think there's anything on the agenda and I don't want to put the rules of procedure on. We'll still be virtual in 2 weeks, I'm sure. The other thing that's floating out there is a presentation from the City Dock Committee, which I would love to get an update from where that stands, because it may be water under the bridge at this point. That was recommendations 3 months ago. I don't know
Tim?
where they are right now.
Tim, I just emailed Eileen Fogarty while we were meeting on that question of where things stand in the progress of work on the city dock. So if I hear something that informs your question, I'll pass that on to you right away.
Yeah, if things have changed or they've been, I kind of viewed that group as their work was done and it's now
No.
moved on to the city RFP process. So, well, I'd be interested to hear what she has to say. If anyone hasn't reviewed it, we can review it online and we can talk about it together. If we're interested in doing that in the May meeting, we can do that virtually. It's kind of up to you all. What do you think?
Well, I'll check the availability of the instructor.
Okay.
For both May and June, see what the possibilities are.
All right. That's
Okay.
great.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, well,
Thanks everyone
Roberta,
for hanging in there.
I went and looked this week and NAPC is going virtual this year, like most
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So that's a little unfortunate, I think, but
Always, never as good.
no. So hopefully we can, they'll have some virtual things that we can tie into and get some good input from.
Yeah. Well,
Yes,
this one,
because we
this one-
did receive another training grant. So hopefully there will be other opportunities.
yeah.
Okay.
I thought this went pretty well tonight. I hope we don't have to do it again in June, but I think we're getting the hang of this. Thank you, Hillary.
Okay.
So will
Yeah.
there,
I'm doing this 5 hours a day.
You poor thing. Pat, you're muted.
Yeah, but you.
Muted.
will there,
No
will
wonder
there be
nobody's
an
paying attention.
administrative meeting?
Yeah,
Tim?
you haven't adjourned your meeting yet.
No, we haven't.
No.
Move
Just, I have,
adjourned.
I have
Okay.
one, wait,
well-
I have a question and I have a comment. Quick. What did you say that the training would be on?
Ethics.
Oh, ethics. Okay. And secondly, thank you for bringing those of the newer commission members don't quite understand what went on with 110 compromise. So thank you for being discerning in making sure that, what needs to come before us comes before us.
All right.
So thank you.
I would like to, before we close, I'd like to agree with Pat that I appreciate Roberta's work on this. But I think that those of us that haven't been longtime members do understand the progress of this project.
Okay. Tammy, have we missed anything? Are you there?
No, we have not.
She's still
All
here.
right. I'll
No,
take a
I
move.
am.
I'll take
I
a
am.
motion to adjourn.
No, I am here. I wanted to know if we're having an administrative meeting. I didn't hear that.
At this point, I'm leaning no.
Okay,
Anybody else? We don't have anything on the agenda other than things we want to do personally in person. So if you're trying to schedule your time, Tammy, probably not.
okay.
Is that okay with everybody?
But I thought I was
Sure.
checking the schedule of the trainer for,
I would think June would be the earliest for that.
okay.
All right.
I think the governor's message is now through the end of May, so June would probably be fine.
Okay. Great. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So
I'm
moved.
so moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you.